There are pains that do not make noise. They do not scream. They do not knock you down all at once. They stay quietly, like a tiny crack on glass, one you only notice when the light hits at just the right angle. And Libra, you are carrying a pain like that. It may come from a relationship that was once beautiful, where you placed your trust, your generosity, and the belief that if you tried just a little harder, balance would return. It may be the feeling of being betrayed, not through words, but through silence, through slowly becoming the one who has to guess, who has to reassure themselves, telling their own heart that maybe the other person did not mean to hurt them, or maybe it is something quieter still, a long, lingering sense of being out of rhythm. Life keeps moving, everything on the outside seems fine, but inside you, nothing feels settled anymore. Libra is not used to naming their pain. You tend to rationalize it, soften it, set it aside, just to keep the space around you peaceful. You know how to listen, you know how to adjust, you know how to compromise. You are very good at making other people feel comfortable, but rarely do you ask yourself in all those moments of keeping things balanced, who is holding space for you? The pain you carry did not arrive to punish you. It is not proof that you are weak or that you did something wrong. It came because you went too far in forgetting yourself. It is a quiet whisper from within, saying that something has been neglected for too long, that a part of you is tired, drained, and needs to be seen and treated with the same fairness you so freely give to others. There is something few people ever say to Libra. You were not born to always be the most understanding person in the room. You were not born to constantly reshape yourself to fit other people's emotions. And you were never meant to trade your own peace for temporary stability in relationships that no longer nourish you. This pain appears because you have grown to a point where old compromises no longer fit. It is like a jacket that once fit you perfectly as a child. No matter how much you try to stretch it now, there is no longer enough room to breathe. And your body, your heart, your spirit are sending a very clear signal that it is time for something different. If you feel exhausted without knowing why, if you feel empty even when surrounded by familiar faces, if old questions are returning to your thoughts, this is not weakness. This is emotional intelligence waking up. This is the deepest part of you preparing for a greater adjustment, one that is more honest, more aligned, and more fair to you. And when you sit with this pain, without rushing to push it away, without trying to fix it, simply listening, as you would listen to an old friend returning after many years, you begin to realize it did not come to stay forever. It came to guide you, to show you where you lost yourself, and where you need to return. There are moments in life when the silence inside becomes too loud to ignore, and within that silence, a very real question begins to form, gentle yet impossible to avoid, as if life itself is quietly tilting the scales toward you, waiting for you to look again and choose something different. And as those scales begin to shift, Libra slowly realizes a truth that feels both strange and familiar. For a long time now, you have been the one standing in the middle, holding everything together, so nothing would fall apart. You are the one who lowers your voice before a conversation turns tense, the one who steps back so no one else has to feel hurt, the one who swallows the words that were never spoken. You became used to thinking of others before thinking of yourself, so used to it that sometimes you could no longer tell where compassion ended and where over-sacrifice began. You told yourself, just a little more. One more moment of patience. One more time of holding back. And everything would be okay. You believed that if you were patient enough, understanding enough, kind enough, balance would return. But some forms of balance are created by tilting completely to one side. And you have been the side quietly carrying the weight for a very long time. There are evenings when you are too tired to explain anything to anyone, not because you no longer care, but because you have already spent all your energy keeping everything intact. There are moments when you stay silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because you sense that even if you spoke, no one would truly listen, so you choose silence. You nod, you step back. One more time. You carry other people's emotions as if they were your responsibility. You wonder if you are too sensitive, if you are asking for too much, when all you truly want is to be treated fairly, to be cared for naturally, without having to trade your own well-being for it. And still, you continue, because you do not want to disrupt the peace. You do not want to be the one who makes everything messy. What you did not realize then is that prolonged endurance does not make you more noble. It only pulls you farther away from yourself. Each time you ignore your own feelings, a part of you steps back. Each time you tell yourself, "It's fine," a small empty space appears. And over time, those empty spaces gather into a deep exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion no amount of sleep can fix. You are not weak because you endured. On the contrary, you have been very strong. But even the strongest people have limits. There comes a point where patience is no longer love, but self-abandonment. And Libra, you have been standing closer to that point than you realize. Perhaps you began to sense this through very small changes. You are no longer excited the way you used to be. Things that once brought you joy now leave you feeling empty. You start to wonder why you feel so tired, even when nothing major seems to be wrong. But it is the accumulation of small, unresolved moments that has been draining you little by little. And then, in a very ordinary moment, maybe when you are sitting alone, or when you hear a sentence that accidentally touches a hidden wound, you suddenly understand that you cannot continue like this anymore. Not because you no longer love, but because you need to love yourself first. That realization is not loud, it is not dramatic, but it is clear enough to make your heart tighten slightly, like a quiet signal that something is approaching, something unavoidable, something that will ask you to stop and finally look directly at the truth you have been trying to soften for far too long. And from that truth, a very strange feeling begins to spread inside you. Not panic, not quite sadness, but a quiet tension, like the air before a storm suddenly growing heavy. You can feel it, that you are standing at a fragile edge. Everything still looks familiar. Life keeps moving. People keep saying the same words. But inside you, something no longer fits. There are days when you try to repeat the same routines, hoping the unease will simply fade away. But the more you try to keep things the same, the clearer the misalignment becomes. An offhand comment is enough to make your chest tighten. A small gesture is enough to remind you that you no longer have the strength to pretend you are fine the way you used to. Things that were carefully hidden, both inside you and within the relationship you are in, begin searching for the surface. The breaking point does not arrive like a sudden collapse. It comes like a slow spreading crack, quiet enough that you only hear it in moments of silence. It may be the moment you no longer want to explain yourself, the moment you do not smile in time to soften the room, the moment you choose to speak honestly about how you feel, even as your voice trembles and your heart races. These moments seem small, but they are signs that you can no longer force yourself into the old shape. You may wonder if you are making too much of this, if you should try just a little harder, but deep down, you know this is no longer about effort. This is about truth, and truth, when it is ready to be seen, will not accept being pushed away ever again. You may feel afraid that if everything breaks open, you will lose something important. Afraid that if you stop holding balance for others, everything will fall into chaos. What you have not realized yet is that the real chaos has existed for a long time. It has simply been happening quietly inside you. This breaking point did not come to destroy your life. It came to end a state that lasted far too long, a state where you had to make yourself smaller so everything around you could stay the same. When emotions are compressed for too long, they will find a way out. Not by making you weaker, but by forcing you to be honest. Honest about how tired you are. Honest about your need for respect. Honest about the limits you can no longer cross just to preserve an image of harmony. This moment may cost you a few nights of sleep. It may cause you to look at old choices with different eyes. And at the same time, a very small sense of relief begins to appear, as if you have finally stopped fighting yourself, as if something within you is quietly whispering that the fact things cannot continue as they were is not something to fear, but something necessary, because it is precisely at this place that seems most fragile, where you can no longer cling to familiar ways, that you begin to stand taller, not because you already have the answers, but because you are finally willing to ask the right questions. And in the silence that follows, when nothing can be hidden anymore, a subtle movement begins to form, just enough for you to sense that life has not turned its back on you. It is only changing direction, slowly, steadily, guiding you closer to yourself. And as that movement becomes clearer, Libra begins to feel as if an invisible hand has gently rested on your shoulder, not to pull you forward, not to force a decision, only to remind you that this moment is no longer about endurance. It is a quiet invitation, soft but undeniable, asking you to pause in the middle of a life that keeps moving fast and look directly at yourself without turning away. This challenge does not arrive in a dramatic form. It does not need intensity to make itself known. It may come through an ordinary sentence, one you have heard before, but this time your heart sinks. Through a familiar situation where you suddenly realize you no longer respond the same way. Through a small choice where you understand you cannot continue placing other people's emotions ahead of your own sense of peace, not anymore. And right there, fate asks the question you have been avoiding for a long time. A question without blame, without accusation. One that simply waits quietly for your most honest answer. Choosing to continue enduring is a path you know well. It feels safe in a certain way because you know exactly when to stay silent, how much to tolerate, how far to bend so nothing becomes unsettled. And you also know the cost of that path. Sleepless nights without a name, the emptiness you feel even when someone is beside you, the slow moment when you no longer recognize yourself in the mirror. That path was not wrong, but it has completed its role in your life. The other choice feels more frightening, not because it is dangerous, but because it asks you to step outside the familiar image of who you have been. Choosing yourself may disappoint someone. It may disturb relationships that were built on your silent sacrifice. It may bring guilt to the surface, even though you have done nothing wrong. And yet, deep inside, you feel something else, a very small sense of relief. As if simply imagining a life where you are honest with your feelings makes your heart feel just a little lighter. This challenge does not ask you to become cold or selfish. It does not demand that you cut ties or tear anything down immediately. It asks one simple question, and it is a difficult one. Are you willing to stand beside others as an equal? Are you willing to let your needs, your feelings, your boundaries exist without apology? And when you allow yourself to truly consider that, you begin to realize this is not a betrayal of anyone. This is a return. There will be moments when you tremble before this decision, moments when you doubt yourself, when you wonder if you are too sensitive, if you are making things bigger than they are. But each time you are honest with what you feel, even in silence, a strange strength begins to return, not loud, not dramatic, but steady. As if, at last, you are standing in the correct place on the scale you have been holding for others for far too long. And slowly you begin to understand that fate was never testing how much you could endure. It was asking whether you had the courage to choose fairness for yourself. Each time you speak the truth, each time you pause before forcing yourself to be okay, each time you listen to your body and your heart, you are opening a door you once were afraid to touch. The road ahead may not be fully visible yet. You may not know how everything will change, but one thing becomes clear. When you choose yourself, life does not turn away. It steps back slightly. It gives you space to breathe, to stand taller, to see farther. And within that newly opened space, a gentle truth begins to take shape. That moving toward your own light does not take light from anyone else. Instead, it is quietly preparing something more honest, more meaningful, more real, that has been waiting for you just ahead. And as you slow down within the space that has just opened, something very natural begins to happen. The layers of fog you once used to look at life start to thin. Not because someone tells you what the truth is, but because you no longer have the energy to keep deceiving yourself. The truth does not arrive like a blow. It comes gently, steadily, like morning light slipping through a narrow crack, illuminating the corners you once chose to ignore. You begin to look back at relationships, at commitments, at the moments where you gave more than you truly had. And this time, you no longer rush to defend anyone. You no longer search for reasons to explain their behavior or tell yourself why you should understand just a little more. You simply see things as they are. Who stays when you are weak, who appears only when you are strong, who values your presence, and who has grown accustomed to receiving again and again without ever asking how you are feeling. This truth may cause your heart to sink for a moment, because it touches a deep sadness, the sadness of realizing that not everything you sacrificed was ever truly seen, that some people loved your kindness, but never learned how to return it to you. And yet, strangely, alongside that sadness, another feeling begins to rise. Lighter, clearer, a sense of release. Because when you face the truth directly, you no longer have to carry misplaced expectations. You no longer need to please those who have only ever stood on one side of the scale. And in that moment, your inner power begins to return. Not the power to control anyone, but the power to choose. The power to say yes and no honestly. The power to stop when you feel you are giving too much. You realize that sacrifice only has meaning when it comes from love, not from fear of loss. And that you do not need to prove your worth by enduring any longer. Your value has always been there, quiet, steady. Even when you stop trying to be the most agreeable version of yourself in other people's eyes. You may feel a trace of regret. Regret for what you once believed. Regret for the times you stayed silent instead of speaking. But that feeling does not pull you down. It simply makes you wiser, more awake. You begin to understand that letting go of illusions is not a loss. It is the return of truth, and truth, even when uncomfortable, always carries a deep healing power. When you no longer place yourself in the position of carrying everyone else's emotions, you begin to feel your body again. Your breath deepens, your sleep becomes lighter. The thoughts in your mind stop running in endless circles. You begin to hear a very quiet inner voice. The voice you once drowned out with responsibility and endurance. Now it becomes clearer, calmer, and it guides you with respect. This awakening does not turn you into someone else. It simply brings you back to where you belong, to a place where you can give without depletion, love without hurting yourself, be present without sacrificing who you are, just to be accepted. And as you stand firmly in your own truth, the world around you begins to change how it reflects back to you. Not everyone will be able to keep up. New distances may appear. And at the same time, a very clear feeling spreads within you, that at last, you are living honestly. And in that clarity, you begin to walk lighter, steadier, as if each step is no longer being pulled back by things that no longer belong to you. And when you no longer have to spend your energy keeping everything outside calm and intact, a very precious silence begins to form within you. Inside that silence, you no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to explain or justify how you feel. You are simply there, fully present with yourself for the first time in a very long while. And it is from this presence that real change begins to take root. You realize how used you were to searching for balance outside yourself, in other people's reactions, in whether everything seems smooth and peaceful. But now, you begin to sense a different kind of balance, deeper, more lasting. A balance that comes from knowing your limits, from knowing when to move forward and when to stop. It is not loud, it does not announce itself, but it allows you to stand steadier through changes that once shook you. Your energy shifts in a very subtle way. Others may not know how to name it, but they can feel it. You no longer rush to fill empty space with words or concessions. You no longer feel the need to keep everyone close through self-sacrifice. Instead, you show up gently, honestly, and that honesty creates a natural pull. Relationships built on respect become clearer. What no longer fits quietly moves away without needing to be pushed. The way you love begins to change as well. You are still gentle, you still care deeply, but you no longer trade your peace to hold on to someone's affection. You learn how to love without losing yourself, to give without becoming empty, to listen without erasing your own voice. There is a warm steadiness in the way you show up now. Those who remain near you feel safe, not because you always give in, but because you are real. Your choices become clearer too. Less hesitation, less measuring every small reaction before deciding. You listen to your intuition more. And this time, it is no longer drowned out by the fear of disappointing someone else. You understand that choosing yourself does not mean turning away from the world. It simply means you are no longer turning away from yourself. You may even be surprised to discover that this decisiveness does not make you harder. It makes you lighter. Each decision aligned with your true values brings a small exhale, as if invisible weight is being set down, layer by layer. You do not need to do everything perfectly. You only need to do things honestly. And within this quiet shift life begins to respond differently. Situations that once felt heavy move through more gently. Relationships that once demanded effort either adjust on their own or fall away naturally. You no longer need to control this. You simply keep yourself anchored in inner balance. And everything else finds its way. A very clear feeling slowly spreads within you. You are no longer chasing balance. You are becoming it. And as you move from this place, each step carries a genuine calm, enough to lead you toward new experiences, new connections, new opportunities. Quietly waiting for you ahead, ready to meet you in the most honest and whole version of yourself. And when you remain steady in that state of balance long enough, you begin to sense a new rhythm forming around you. Not through loud signs, but through a feeling that is familiar, yet one you have not touched in a very long time. You wake up one morning and your heart feels lighter. A conversation flows more naturally. A decision is made without so much inner struggle. These changes are small, quiet, but they signal that you have crossed the boundary of an old phase of life. This new cycle does not begin with gaining something immediately. It begins when you stop clinging to what no longer nourishes you. You look at what leaves with different eyes. No resentment, no holding on. Just a calm recognition that it has fulfilled its purpose. And within that recognition, you realize the loss is not as great as you once feared. Instead, there is more space. As if a window inside you has just been opened, allowing fresh air and new light to move freely through. You become clearer with yourself, clear about what you want, what you need, and what no longer fits. This clarity does not close you off. It opens you in a healthier way. You no longer fear that if you do not hold on tightly, everything will disappear. Because you have learned that what is truly meant for you does not need to be held together by anxiety or excessive sacrifice. There is a very different kind of strength present within you now. Not the strength to fight, but the strength of trust. Trust in your ability to stand on your own. Trust that even when things change, you remain whole inside. And as the fear of loss fades, you begin to move forward with more ease, with more openness. You allow yourself to receive what is new without comparing it to the past. You allow others to enter your life without carrying the responsibility of healing old wounds for them. What leaves does not take away what is good. It leaves to return honesty to you, to return your time, your energy, your presence, things you once scattered too thin. And as you begin to invest these resources back into yourself, life responds in very different ways. New people arriving at the right time, new paths you once never dared to imagine, or simply a deep sense of peace when you are alone, without the need to fill the space with anything at all. This new cycle does not ask you to become someone else. It invites you to live as the version of yourself that has grown, the version that no longer proves worth through endurance. The version that understands true stability begins with self-respect. And when you live from that place, you begin to notice that what is good does not arrive through force or pleading. It arrives naturally, as if life itself is finally meeting you at the right moment, at the right rhythm, in a chapter where you are ready to receive without fear. And then, there comes a very quiet moment when you look back at the road you have just walked and it no longer feels as heavy as it once did. The pain is still there in memory, but it no longer controls your emotions. It becomes like an old story, placed gently back into its rightful place in your life. Not denied, not exaggerated, simply acknowledged with a tenderness you once never offered yourself. You begin to understand that this pain never came to end you. It came to wake you up. It came to slow the pace of a life you had been holding together for far too long, for other people. It came to show you that endurance is not the only measure of love or of human worth. And when you look at pain through that lens, it is no longer frightening. It becomes an open door waiting for you to walk through when you are ready. Stepping through that door does not mean forgetting what happened. It simply means you no longer live there. You carry the wisdom, you carry the understanding, you carry the lessons paid for with very real emotion, but you do not carry the weight. You leave behind what once made you shrink, what made you doubt yourself, what made you ask if you were ever enough. You may be surprised to discover that life on the other side of that door is not more perfect in the way you once imagined, but it is more honest. You laugh when you are truly joyful. You stop when you are truly tired. You speak when you need to be heard. And in these very ordinary moments, you feel a new kind of peace, Not a peace that comes from everything being perfect, but a peace that comes from no longer betraying yourself. Libra, you still love beauty. You still value harmony. You still long for deep connection. But now, you no longer seek balance by sacrificing yourself. You become your own anchor first. And from that place, you step back into the world with a steadier heart. You allow yourself to receive respect, to receive kindness, to receive relationships that do not require you to make yourself smaller to fit. The road ahead may still have its turns, but you no longer fear them the way you once did, because you know that no matter what happens, you will not return to abandoning yourself. You have learned how to stand with yourself in the hardest moments, and that is something no one can take from you. If there is a gentle message for you now, it is this. You do not need to rush to become a better version of yourself. You only need to keep becoming a more honest one, each day. Life will adjust itself to meet you where you are standing, not where you are reaching from fear. The pain has completed its role. It has brought you here. What comes next does not require more effort, only a quiet trust as you continue walking forward, knowing that what is opening ahead is not a reward for suffering, but the natural result of choosing to live true to yourself. And in that stillness, you will realize that everything you once searched for outside has finally begun to bloom right where you stand.